everyone, this is Maureen with My Crochet Story, and welcome back to another tutorial on the single crochet cluster stitch. Now this is design number 2. I told you that there are 4 different ways in which we can use the idea of taking 2 single crochets, combining them together into one stitch, and that's why we call it the single crochet cluster stitch. A reminder that it's also known as 2 single crochets together or the single crochet decrease, but no matter what name you wish to call it by, we're going to call it the single crochet cluster stitch. We will be looking at another way of how to use the stitch and come up with a different design. Now if you were with me last week, you saw how we just take the cluster stitch itself just by simply doing a chain, a base of single crochets, and then just start combining 2 stitches together, 2 stitches together, chain 1, and we came up with a very nice dense fabric. Well, this week we're using the same idea of the cluster stitch, but it's where we're placing those stitches to give it a little bit different texture and look. Now as you can see here, we have this little ridge, and we're going to build these ridges by working in the back loop only. And you can see that it makes a nice design on front and back. I did use a little bit of scrap yarn I had from this ball left over. This is yarn from I Love This Cotton. Excuse me, I Love This Yarn. It is a 100% acrylic, and it is also a medium, a very nice medium 4-weight yarn. And I also used my Furls Eye hook. This is a 5.5 millimeter. You will find a link for Furls. I am an affiliate, so if you are a Furls girl like I am, or if you're interested in trying out a Furls hook, please be sure to use my link that's provided for you down in the description box. It doesn't cost you anything, but I do get a small commission, just a few pennies off of each sale, and I use that money, turn it right back around to put into my channel. So if you're looking either for a new hook, or if you're looking for some of the new hooks that Furls has put out recently, please be sure to use the link. And folks, they do have a really nice sale on Furls hooks and some clearance items going on right now, so be sure you jump on over there and look to see what there is and see if there's something that tickles your fancy. Alright, so if you wish to follow along with me in the tutorial, go and grab you some yarn. Now it doesn't have to be a 4-weight, doesn't have to be acrylic, but if you've just got some yarn hanging around and you want to practice along with me, be sure and go grab it. Get a hook that is comparable are complementary to the yarn that you're using. You don't have to use the 4-weight if you've got some 3-weight or a bulky 5. Like I said, it doesn't matter. This stitch works well with any of our yarn types, but I would just say that if you're going to practice it, be sure that you use the hook size that's recommended for your yarn. Now if you don't wish to follow along, just sit back, relax, and listen to me chitter chatter and show you how this comes together. And then at the end, I will compare this swatch to our swatch from last week, and we will see how they are alike and how they're different. So let's get to stitching. Excuse me. Alright, so I have already created a chain of 20 stitches. Now remember, this is made in multiples of 2 or any even number, plus I've already added 1 extra chain, gives me my turning chain. So I have actually chained 21 stitches. Now remember, this loop on your hook does not count as a chain, it's just your working loop to get you started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn this chain into a row of single crochets, and I'm going to do that by working in this back bump of my chain. I prefer it, as many of you know, because it gives me a nice V look on the bottom of my work. Now you can work into the top loop of this first chain, or into each of the chains if you prefer, if you don't like working in the back loop. I just like working in the back loop or this bump. So I'm going to go in here and create single crochet, insert my hook, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. So hopefully you all know how to do a single crochet, but if not, it is one of your very basic stitches. Go into the loop, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That's all we're doing, and we're going to make single crochets, as I said, all the way back down the chain. Sorry, my throat's a little scratchy today. Like I can't keep it clear. But we have had rain overnight, and I have been out a couple of times with the pups, so I'm sure that's what is creating this. Get my hands back up here in the camera. Now, in working in the back loop here, you do have to make sure you keep it flat against your hand so that you find that back loop. And yes, it is going to curl on you. I've told you this before. But just, rub your finger along the back and it will straighten it back out for you. Some more yarn here. We'll just keep continuing down. Now, I would suggest that you practice this before you use it in any design, if you like to design your own patterns, so that you'll know where your stitches are going to fall. All right, coming down here to the last stitch, last chain to make my last stitch. And as I said, I started out with 20 chains plus 1, because it's an even number, plus 1, so I should have now 20 single crochets. And I also suggest that you always go back and count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. All right. So we are going to start with our setup row here. Going to chain 1 and turn our work, and in this very first single crochet here I'm going to put a half double crochet. I know this is a single crochet cluster stitch pattern, isn't it? And we're going to start it out and we're going to end it with a half double crochet because it gives us the height that we need to keep the row itself nice and even. So to make a half double crochet, we put a loop on our hook, go into the stitch, pull up a loop. We have 3 loops on our hook, going to yarn over and pull through all 3. Now we're going to start our cluster. We're going to work into the next 2 stitches, but what we're going to do is we're going to work in the, no, this is our setup row. Excuse me, I said, excuse me. We're starting with a half double crochet. Now we're going to do our single crochet cluster stitch. If you recall, you simply go into 1 stitch, pull up a loop, go into the next stitch, pull up the loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 3. Now many of you may know this as 2 single crochets together, and that's exactly what it is. Or you could call it a single crochet decrease. But for the intent and purposes of this tutorial, we're calling this the single crochet cluster stitch. Now after you've made your tied your 2 together, we're going to chain 1. And then we're going to, work right on over into the next 2 stitches, and we're going to do that again. So we're going to go into the next stitch and pull up a loop, go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through all 3 and chain 1. We've made another single crochet cluster, and we're just going to do that all the way to the end, taking 2 stitches, putting them together to make a cluster, and chain 1. Into the next stitch, pull up a loop, into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull all 3, and chain 1. Now don't forget that chain 1 because it's very important, because as you notice we are taking the space of 2 stitches and combining it into 1. And in order to take care of this space that, or this stitch that we put together with the other stitch, we have to chain 1. So that now takes the place of the stitch that we combined with the other one. So a loop into that one, a loop into the next one. We make our single crochet cluster and finish it off with a chain 1. And we're just going to do that again all the way down, combining 2 stitches into 1 and then making up the space with the chain 1. There's our little single crochet cluster and the chain 1. Coming down here to the end, you'll have 3 stitches left, but remember we started with a half double crochet, make our cluster, chain 1, and we're going to end with a double crochet. Alright, so we should still have 20 stitches. Even though we combine stitches together, we should still have 20 stitches. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. All right, now that became our setup row for our little pattern. This next row becomes the repeat that builds on the pattern that we're looking for. So we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and again our row is going to start with a half double crochet right back into that half double crochet we completed at the end of the other row. Now we're going to chain 1. Excuse me, no we're not. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to build our cluster stitches, but we're going to be working in the back loop only of the chain and the cluster that we made. So we're going to go into the back loop. Remember we have these 2 loops that make up the V on our stitch, and we're just going to go in the back loop. So we go into the back loop of the chain, pull up a loop, go into the back loop of the stitch itself, pull up a loop. We have our 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, and now we're going to chain 1. And that's all we're going to do all the way down the row. So we've used the chain and the stitch to make our cluster stitch, and then we chain 1 to take up the space. So again, go into the back loop of your chain. I'm going to show you that right here is your chain from the row before. So go back into the back loop of the chain, then into the back loop of your cluster stitch from below, 3 loops, yarn over, there's our cluster stitch and our chain 1, and we're just doing that all the way down. So here's our chain, excuse me, there's our chain, did I go into the chain or the cluster? Let me make sure I didn't skip a stitch here. Okay, there's our chain, and there's our cluster stitch, chain 1, there she is, there's our chain, back into the chain, back into the cluster. Remember, working in the back loops only of each one, into the chain in the back loop, into the chain of the cluster of the back loop, make our cluster and chain 1, and we're doing this all the way down. So we're going into the back loop of the chain, back loop of our cluster stitch, and chain 1. Don't forget that chain 1 or it's going to really mess up your next row, and it'll also mess up the count at the end of your row. Back loop, pull through all 3 and chain 1, back loop, pull through all 3, chain 1. We're coming down here to our last one. We made our cluster stitch. We still have to chain 1, and then in this very last stitch we started with a half double crochet, and we're going to end with our half double crochet. Going to make sure, now it looks nice and flat, doesn't it? But I want to make sure that I have my 20 stitches, so I'm going to stop a minute. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And this just becomes the repeat for the rest of your swatch, your pattern, whatever it is you're going to use the stitch for. So we start off again with a half double crochet right there in the top of the one from that we finished off the row with. Here's my chain, so I'm going again into the back loop, pull up a loop, back loop of the stitch, pull up a loop, make my cluster, and chain 1. And you will find that after a while you just get a rhythm going, and we just continue with the repeat pattern into the chain back loop, into the stitch back loop, make our cluster stitch, and chain 1. Again, back loop of the chain, back loop of the cluster, make our cluster stitch, and chain 1. And we will just repeat this all the way down and repeat it for as many rows as we want. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this makes a really nice dense fabric. It also makes a nice little stitch pattern if you're designing something and you just want something to break up whatever it is you're doing. I like using this little stitch, especially when I'm making hats. So I've come down to the end here and I'm going to finish off with my half double crochet. And as you can see, over time it's going to build up this pretty little ridge here, which also helps to give you a nice definition. Let me bring her in here. There we go. See that nice little ridge there, and it sets off the stitch pattern itself. So I'm going to do one more row with you. Remember, we're going to start with a half double crochet. And going into the back loop of the stitch, of the chain and the stitch, we're going to make a new cluster. And chain 1. Moving on. Back loop chain, back loop cluster, make a new cluster stitch, and chain 1. And we're just doing that all the way down the row. Like I said, it makes a nice little pattern here. In a few minutes, I'm going to go off camera and very quickly work up the swatch. We'll come back and compare it to last week's swatch so that you can see, even though they both will have the same name at the end of my row here, sorry, and make my half double. And again, real quick, I am going to count because it's very important. It's really easy in this little pattern to skip a stitch. So let's make sure we have our 20. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. Yes. So hopefully you can see as you're building your rows, you're also building this nice little ridge, like I said, that will set off your stitch. So I'll come back and meet you here in just a few more minutes, after I have a few extra rows so that we can compare the two swatches. Alright, so here is my swatch for you. I did a couple of extra rows. Now as you can see, there's this nice little ridge definition here from working in the back loop. It is the same on the front and on the back. That's kind of what makes this stitch really nice, is that by turning back and forth, you're going to get the same stitch definition. So as you can see too, it still makes a nice dense fabric. As I said, I liked using this stitch, especially in hats and sweaters, cardigans, to kind of break up whatever the pattern is that I'm using. It also looks very nice if you want to do it in a make your panels and then do it in a vertical format, because this ridging here draws attention to help elongating, especially if you're making something for, like for myself, I like anything that's going vertical because it kind of takes away from the width of my body. So this would also make a very nice stitch. You know, even though you'll be working it back and forth in rows, you can make it to where it ends up in this vertical fashion for you. Now I want you to look at this swatch, and I'm going to leave it in this so that I can get both of them in here because I want you to look at them. This is our original single crochet cluster, and as you can see, there is a little bit of difference. Number one, this one does, like I said, have this nice ridge. They're both created by using the cluster stitch pattern itself, which is where we take two single crochet stitches, put them together to make our cluster, and with the chain one pattern. But as you can see, we have two different outcomes, and one of it is just the placement of the stitches themselves, where we put them. Now the only difference between these two is we're still using two stitches, putting them together in the chain one. It's just that this one is without going into the back loop. This one is used going through two loops, and this one here is gone through just the back loop only. But look at the difference in the way they look, in the way they come out. This one, obviously, in our original single crochet cluster, which is the one that we're most commonly used to seeing, is very much more dense. This one here opens up just a little bit because we have that chain one space that we're working into, plus we're going into the back loop of the stitch itself when we're working from one row to the next. So there you go. Here we have single crochet cluster number 1 and single crochet cluster number 2. And next week we will look at another variation of using the single crochet cluster stitch itself, followed by chain one, and by looking at where we place it in the stitches themselves from the row before, how we can take just this simple little idea and make another design. Thank you so much for being here with me to see these little stitches as they develop, just by, like I said, changing up where we want to put them, either in the stitch pattern itself or in the loops from one row to the next. So I do hope that you'll join me next week. If you didn't catch a look at how we developed this first single crochet cluster, you'll find a link for it down in the description box and also in an end card. So once again, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you have a great day, and please always remember, be the light out there in the darkness for someone today, because you never know, could be your light they need to see. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week. Bye.